This is unprecedented flood events.
On this Monday night, emergency in Texas, the grim recovery mission, the missing children.
I've spoken to multiple parents, scared out of their mind.
And the obstacles for the crew. Two provinces make nice and make deals.
We need to unlock the full potential of our economy.
The big projects Alberta and Ontario have agreed to consider and what each premier is trying to persuade the other to do. A triple murder by mushroom. The woman convicted of killing her relatives with poisonous food. Plus, a different school of rock.
I knew I had to apply.
The Manitoba Viking aficionado about to pursue his passion in Iceland.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin in Texas, where a flood watch remains in effect in regions already dealing with the aftermath of the worst flash flooding in decades. At least 100 people, many of them children, are known to have died across central Texas, swept away by catastrophic flooding over the 4th of July weekend. Search crews are still looking for dozens of missing people, but are hampered by all the debris, mud, and the continued rainfall. The floodwaters rose fast while most people were sleeping. This time lapse shows water rising over a causeway, submerging it in a matter of minutes. There have been flash floods in the region before, and heavy rains were forecast, flood warnings issued. But as Jackson Proskow reports, that was not enough to save lives.
The receding floodwaters reveal an unimaginable tragedy as rescue workers look for survivors but find only bodies.
I need to tell my community and those families who are waiting, this will be a rough week.
Ilda Mendoza made a grim discovery while leading the search for her missing neighbors. The elderly couple was last seen holding hands as they were washed away.
We found two bodies, a little girl and a little boy. And then we finally came up here and we found the dad that we were looking for.
4 months worth of rain fell in just a few hours, drenching the Texas hill country in the middle of the night.
We had first responders that were getting swept away, actually responding to the first areas of rainfall.
The victims include 13-year-old Blair Harbor and her 11-year-old sister Brooke, along with their grandparents. The girls were found 25 kilometers away from where the water took them, their hands still locked together. The water came so fast there was no time to escape. It's believed many people failed to receive warnings or simply ignored them.
You could see the lights of vehicles getting washed off from upriver, and you can hear honking. You couldn't see anything, but you can hear honking and you can hear the screaming.
If we'd waited 5 more minutes, we would have been one of these people down the river.
At Camp Mystic, an all-girls camp, at least 27 campers and counselors are confirmed dead. Nearly a dozen other campsites along the river were damaged.
The hardest part was there was a little boy who started floating downstream, and he was screaming, asking for help, but there just wasn't anything anybody could do at that point.
In July 1987, a flash flood on the same river killed 10 teenagers who were camping, but no local warning system was ever installed along the banks of the Guadalupe. Decades later, a fresh tragedy has exposed the risks of what local officials call the most dangerous river valley in America. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
There are rescues underway in North Carolina, too. Crews have brought more than 50 people to safety. One woman was killed when floodwaters from a tropical storm swept her car off the road. 2 canoers are still missing. More than 20 centimeters of rain fell in parts of that state. Ontario's premier says he wants to work with Alberta to build pipelines and railways. Doug Ford is in Calgary, where he signed an agreement with Premier Danielle Smith to study the feasibility of building new energy corridors. The 2 Conservative premiers flipped pancakes at a Calgary Stampede breakfast. Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe was also there. Ford says the goal is to make Canada's economy more resilient and less reliant on the U.S. Colin D'Mello reports.
2 signature projects now getting cross-provincial support.
We're uniting with Ontario to amplify our voices and double down on our efforts to carve a path forward together.
The provinces will start a joint feasibility study looking into a pipeline that would take Alberta oil east to Ontario and a rail line porting Ontario's critical minerals west to Alberta.
This is how we diversify our trading partners. This is how we make ourselves less reliant on the United States.
The details of how this would work are hazy. The provinces agreed to study the optimal routes, the end points, and how to finance a project in the tens of billions of dollars. Other provinces, including British Columbia and Quebec, were not part of the announcement, raising questions about how realistic the project truly is.
We're talking about a government that's going to waste money on the feasibility study for a project that's going to happen 10, 20 years into the future. So this seems more like a photo op than a real announcement.
The agreement also appears to soothe the tensions between Smith and Ford, who disagreed over the Canadian response to Trump. Smith had cautioned Doug Ford against threats to cut off energy to the United States.
I think it's a non-starter. I think it's too dangerous to even talk about cutting off energy.
While Ford urged Danielle Smith to consider an export tax on oil.
Protect your jurisdiction, but country comes first. Canada's a priority.
The gripes now replaced with gifts, as the two premiers flipped the script on a tenuous relationship. Colin D'Mello, Global News.
The U.S. president has set a new deadline to impose higher tariffs on some countries if no trade deals are done. The deadline is moved from July 9th to August 1st. The White House press secretary says leaders of the countries affected will be notified by letter.
So the reciprocal tariff rate or these new rates that will be provided in this correspondence to these foreign leaders will be going out the door within the next month, or deals will be made.
Letters went out to Japan and South Korea today, putting a 25% tax on imported goods. On his social media platform, Trump posted similar notices to a dozen other countries. This doesn't appear to affect Canada. The Prime Minister's office says it is still working toward making a trade deal with the U.S. by July 21st. After 21 months of war, there is talk again about a Gaza ceasefire. President Donald Trump invited Israel's Prime Minister to the White House today. Benjamin Netanyahu praised Trump and presented him with a letter.
It's nominating you for the Peace Prize, which is well-deserved, and you should get it.
Thank you very much. This I didn't know.
When asked if Palestinians should have their own state, Trump deferred to Netanyahu, didn't answer directly. He said Palestinians should have the freedom to leave Gaza and that Israel is working with the U.S. to find countries to take them. But security over Gaza, Netanyahu said, will always remain in Israel's hands. Redmond Shannon reports on what Israel's military did in Gaza in the past 24 hours.
Another tiny victim of Israeli attacks on Gaza. A child born after the war started and buried before it ends. I ask God that the negotiators solve this issue because this has become totally unbearable, says this man. He had been sheltering in this former medical clinic that was hit by an airstrike. Palestinian and Israeli negotiators are in Qatar trying to reach a ceasefire deal as the US President Donald Trump welcomes Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu to a private dinner at the White House.
To talk about peace in Gaza and ending that conflict.
The 60-day truce plan would reportedly see Hamas hand over 10 living and 18 dead hostages in exchange for a large number of detained Palestinians. Israeli troops would retreat to the buffer zones of Gaza closer to the border walls, and aid would be significantly increased, with the United Nations again playing a role. The details of how that would work are reportedly a major sticking point. In recent weeks, the UN says there have been hundreds of deaths at or near the new US-backed aid hubs in Gaza. Netanyahu still insists he wants Hamas eliminated completely before the war ends, suggesting a desire to resume the conflict once any new truce expires. But Hamas wants a US guarantee that the ceasefire become permanent, also a huge hurdle.
Up to this point, Trump has not indicated that he is willing to pressure Netanyahu to withhold US security assistance, which is what would be necessary. Otherwise, Netanyahu really does not have an interest in ending this war.
The White House says that American Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, will head to Qatar later this week to take part in ceasefire talks, suggesting there remains more work to do before any deal can be reached. Donna?
All right, Redmond in London, thank you. The U.S. Department of Justice and the FBI have concluded that sex offender Jeffrey Epstein did not have a so-called client list that could implicate high-profile associates and that he did take his own life, contradicting long-held conspiracy theories about the case. The Justice Department says no further Epstein-related documents will be released. It did release 10 hours of jailhouse security footage that it says shows no one entered Epstein's cell on the day he died by suicide in 2019. He was awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges. A Russian drone attack has killed at least 11 people in Ukraine. This is just moments after one of the attacks. Residential areas and military draft centers were struck in the cities of Zaporizhia and Kharkiv. Ukraine says it's part of Russia's strategy to disrupt its military recruitment. Ukraine also launched drones at Russia. They grounded hundreds of flights at Moscow's international airport over the weekend. And one more note, Russia's transport minister was dismissed from his role without explanation this morning, and hours later, he was found dead in his car with a gunshot wound to his head. Russian authorities say he died by suicide. In northern Manitoba, wildfires that had receded are now roaring back. More than 80 fires are burning in that province, including one near the town of Leaf Rapids. All residents have been told to leave by 10 a.m. tomorrow. The community is not in immediate danger, but officials say an evacuation order was issued because winds are forecast to worsen the situation. Another fire is burning 8 kilometers north of the city of Thompson, Manitoba, which is also under a local state of emergency. Residents have been told to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. It is the murder case that has gripped Australia. Coming up, the woman found guilty of killing 3 relatives with poisonous mushrooms. Plus, how a volcano is wreaking havoc in Bali, and the tiny 4-legged hero who saved a stranded hiker. A volcano in Indonesia is erupting, sending ash high into the sky and causing flight cancellations. The column of gas and ash reached heights up to 18 kilometers, the volcano's highest since an eruption last fall that killed 9 people. Dozens of international flights were canceled today to and from the popular tourist island of Bali. From cook to convicted killer, an Australian woman has been found guilty of murdering 3 of her estranged husband's family members. She invited them over for lunch and fed them beef Wellington laced with poisonous mushrooms. Erin Patterson denies any wrongdoing. She claims it was all an accident. But as Neetu Garcha reports, the evidence suggests otherwise.
It's a story so shocking, it's almost hard to believe.
I've never heard of anybody poisoning someone with mushrooms before.
A jury convicted Erin Patterson of 3 counts of murder and 1 of attempted murder. Prosecutors allege Patterson deliberately served her in-laws and 2 extended family members a poisoned meal. She prepared them beef Wellington laced with death cap mushrooms, a highly toxic fungus known to cause fatal liver failure. Patterson's estranged husband was invited but didn't attend.
I think it's very important that we remember that we've had 3 people. 3 people have died.
The victims were her former father and mother-in-law, Dawn and Gail Patterson, along with Gail's sister, Heather Wilkinson, and her husband, Ian, who survived after a liver transplant. He remained the key witness in the case. One of the most arresting pieces of evidence, this image of the dining table, the seating arrangement recreated by Ian, the lone survivor. He testified he and his family members became sick the day after eating lunch in July of 2023. The others all died later that week in hospital. Another key piece of evidence, a dehydrator with traces of the death caps found in a landfill near Patterson's house. In an interview with 60 Minutes Australia, Patterson said the deaths left her devastated.
I didn't do anything. I loved them.
She denied the charges, and her defense team called the deaths a terrible accident. Prosecutors contended it was premeditated, suggesting strained relationships with Patterson's ex-husband and his parents could have been a potential motive. The court also heard Patterson fabricated a cancer diagnosis to gain sympathy from her guests and as the reason why she hosted the lunch in the first place.
Well, if there's an antisocial personality aspect to it, if there's a psychopathic aspect to it,
There's probably a motive there somewhere that we don't know about.
For now, the only one who knows the truth is Patterson herself. She faces the possibility of life behind bars, with sentencing expected later this year. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
Those same death cap mushrooms are found here in Canada. They are the deadliest of mushrooms. Even a small amount is enough to kill a person, and you need to know what you're doing if you head out foraging. The toxic mushrooms look nearly the same as some highly prized edible mushrooms you can find on the forest floor. Death cap mushrooms have some key features to look out for. Most notably, its yellow-brown cap and skirt. If you're not sure, leave it. Ahead, how do you get 50,000 fans in and out of one new stadium? Why Live Nation is still trying to figure that out. A brand new outdoor stadium in Toronto is welcoming tens of thousands of Coldplay fans tonight for the first of 4 shows. Organizers say they're making adjustments to improve crowd control after the venue's inaugural concert caused chaos and raised some safety concerns. Global's Sean O'Shea is there.
Donna, as Toronto deals with the effects of heat, the city is also getting its first taste of a controversial new outdoor music venue that's experiencing some growing pains. Toronto's new outdoor stadium off in the distance as the band Coldplay conducts sound checks. Their followers showed up hours early to be among the first. These teenagers will be sitting on the grass.
Yeah, we're on the floor seats, so we want to get really close to Chris.
Other Coldplay fans even made up their own T-shirts, traveling from all over Canada.
I'm from Prince Rupert, BC. From Prince Rupert, BC
Prince Rupert as well.
Toronto! Winnipeg, Manitoba!
This is just the second live concert of the new Rogers Stadium, a temporary outdoor venue on the site of the old Downsview Airport and on the edge of an established residential community. But at the opening concert last month, there were long lineups and traffic chaos and a string of issues that left a bad taste with some attendees and residents.
I had people lying down on the grass, throwing their drinks by my trees. My expectations are that it gets better, but I don't believe it will.
Live Nation, the promoter, promised a better experience, said it would be easier for 50,000 fans and support workers to get to and from the stadium. Police blocked access to outside vehicles from getting into the neighborhood. New security cameras were put up. And those arriving in rideshare vehicles were allowed to be dropped off on site, unless they got out of their vehicle on the roadway, where they and other walk-ups were turned away and had to walk half an hour elsewhere. When we met Sergio Razzo from Texas, he'd been walking 2 hours to find a friendly entrance, but kept getting mixed messages.
No, we won't let you in. I'm like, well, where am I supposed to go? They're like, just keep walking, you'll find one.
And with a full summer of music programming, residents believe they'll see more of the same, a fairground on their front doorstep.
It's stressful, it's causing anxiety around the neighborhood, and everything's just a worry.
And the biggest problems associated with that first concert, how to move 50,000 people out of the stadium on public transit and in cars, we don't know how that will turn out this time until after the Coldplay concert. Donna.
Okay, Sean O'Shea, thank you. Reconnecting with his roots next, the Canadian man who turned his love of Viking mythology into an overseas voyage. A man who disappeared while hiking in the southern Swiss Alps has been found thanks to his chihuahua. He was hiking on a glacier with his dog when he fell into a deep crevasse. He used his walkie-talkie to call for help. The helicopter rescue team couldn't see the hole the man fell into, but they did spot his tiny dog. The pup was sitting on a rock, and he'd stayed right next to the crevasse until his owner was rescued. If you've been to Gimley, Manitoba, you know about its strong ties to Icelandic culture and heritage. The first Icelandic festival was held in Manitoba way back in 1890 after Icelandic settlers made their homes in Gimley. Now, one man with roots in that past is embarking on a journey to learn more about where he came from and get a master's degree in all things Viking. Melissa Ridgen explains.
I have the cunning to break their minds.
Vikings. Large, powerful adventurers, conquerors, a people of great fascination for folks like Zachary Sigurdsson.
You're a geek.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm a huge geek. I'm a huge nerd. Everyone who's met me knows that.
Sigurdsson takes Viking history seriously. His paternal roots are in Gimley, Manitoba, an hour north of Winnipeg. It has the largest Icelandic population outside of Iceland. Mass migration in 1875 had Icelanders fleeing famine and poor living conditions. They settled here. The name Gimli means home of the gods in Norse mythology. A festival every summer celebrates Icelandic culture and history.
There's that scholarly historic side, and then there is that if you want to sit and do crafts all day, you can. If you want to swing the swords at friends, you can.
He does swing swords with friends, but he also makes things Vikings would make.
I have bone needles, I have some metal needles. I've made probably 15 pairs of shoes this summer.
And collects things Vikings would collect.
You got yourself a flask. Did you make it?
Yes, this one I made.
But when all of this is no longer enough, enter Viking school.
Looked at the University of Iceland and I saw that they have a program for medieval or Viking and medieval Norse studies. And I knew I had to apply. It's too perfect a thing.
He'll make the move with his girlfriend to Reykjavik next month for a 2-year master's program. To help fund it, he launches his self-published 4-book series this week. The Veiled Sagas is fantasy short fiction blending swords and sorcery with the surreal challenges of the modern world.
We're eager to see how our life changes living in Iceland and then possibly living in Europe, and then it opens up opportunities that we wouldn't otherwise have here.
Well, and I mean, if you just keep traveling here and there and everywhere, it kind of makes you a Viking.
Yeah, a little bit.
Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
That is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. This week, Your Canada is going global. We're showing you pictures of Canadian pride we've received from all over the world. Tonight, we're in Dallas, Texas, Hyderabad, India, and Xpuja, Mexico. Keep them coming. Send your pictures from wherever you are to Global National at globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.